Hey everybody, welcome to Pick Dr. Osborne's Brain. We've got a great show for you tonight, and we're going to be talking all about the prepper's guide to coronavirus, so we're going to be diving into that very shortly. If you're just tuning in, let me know where you're tuning in from. Say hello, don't be shy, give me a like, give me a thumbs up, give me a heart if you like the information that we're bringing to you. So today we're going to be talking about, I call it the prepper's guide to corona or to coronavirus. And the reason why we're continuing to discuss this is because one of the things that happens when people don't properly prepare for the worst possible or worst case scenario is panic sets in. And so it's the panic that actually creates the vast majority of problems, not the actual problem in many cases. And so if you get ready now, if you get the things and do what I talk about doing tonight as just a general preparation, you're going to be so much more ahead than 99% of the population. And you're not going to have to panic. You're not going to have to worry about a number of different things that people are worrying about. I've been in a number of actual scenarios where there were emergency situations. I was in the military, but also some kind of things that might kind of resonate along with coronavirus. One year we were hit by a big hurricane here in the Houston area. Hurricane Ike knocked our power out for 3 weeks. And what happened the first day after the power went out is the grocery store shelves were completely emptied. I mean, literally there was one can left in the grocery store. And the only reason that can was left is because there was no label on it and had a dent in it. And so nobody knew what it was to buy it. But the grocery stores were completely empty. And so you can imagine this was the scenario where when electricity goes out and people aren't prepared, they flock to the stores. They flock to get what they think they might need as a result of the emergency happening. My point in having the show with you tonight is don't wait for that to happen. Go ahead and let's take care of the things that need to be taken care of immediately now, so that if something does happen and something does get out of control, you're prepared for it and you don't have to worry about what everyone else is doing or panicking over. So there's an old ancient Chinese proverb goes like this: failing to plan is planning to fail. So don't be caught in that other camp or in that camp of people who just don't get ahead. Or, there are a lot of people out there saying this isn't going to amount to anything. It's just all scare. Look, maybe it is, but let's look at Italy as our example. Italy's in total lockdown right now. So the reality is we haven't seen that. You haven't seen that. None of the SARS or the other diseases in the past 30, 40 years, none of these disease outbreaks led to a country shutting down its schools and shutting down so many aspects of business. So you want to be prepared for that as a possibility, and hopefully it just won't happen. But if it does, again, you'll be prepared for it. So let's dive into some of the things that I want to talk about. Number one is medications. Now, if you follow me for any length of time, you know that I'm not like the biggest fan of medications in terms of using medicines to treat symptoms to mask what you should be changing in your diet. But many of you are on medications that you might need for, life-threatening illnesses. Many of you might be on medications that are required to treat you as you're changing your diet and lifestyle. And so in that regard, you should understand there are a couple of things going on in the realm of medicines right now. So most of our medicines are outsourced to China and India. And so what that means is, as we rely on other countries and they're sick and they're basically potentially looking at quarantine. I mean, we've got a whole city quarantined in China right now, right? This is going to lower the capacity to deliver those medications. As a matter of fact, I read in a news article a couple of days ago that India is actually planning on not shipping a number of its essential and critical medications. In essence, they're keeping it and saving it for their own citizens. So if we see our ability to get medications, and when I'm talking about medications, there are some helpful medications, in both prescriptive and over the counter. Kind of what I'm talking about here, things like ibuprofen. Again, I'm not a fan of taking these chronically day to day. Tylenol, these can be helpful. They're antipyretics. They break fevers. They can help with fever management. Now, some people would say, well, you don't want to break a fever. Let it run its course. Well, that fever gets at 104 and you can't function and you're in bed and you're just totally wiped out. that's a good time to consider breaking a fever. And these two things can be extremely helpful in that regard. So these are certain types of medicines that you might want to have some of these on hand. And those of you who've been following me who are gluten-free, you definitely want to take the time to make sure you're getting a brand or a version that doesn't have all the corn and GMO filler garbage in it. So these things can be helpful. Aspirin as well. So if you're looking for a natural alternative, in this regard that can also help, that would be something like a white willow bark. A lot of people you can pick that up at a health food store, but white willow bark is something that can be used to break fevers. It's a natural, aspirin is derived from the willow bark. So again, that's an option. Those are options for you. But I would recommend that you have some of this, because if the worst thing happens and you need to have something that helps break a fever, aside from cold compresses or cool water, you want to have a potential medicinal that might be able to help that. Those are good options to have in your medicine cabinet at home. Additionally, though, we're looking at a potential for antibiotic shortage. Now, I know what you're all probably thinking, Dr. Osborne, this is a virus, antibiotics don't work. Yeah, but a lot of times people die from the secondary consequences of the infection. So one of the secondary consequences of a viral infection is a bacterial infection. And so I've seen this happen a number of times in people where they end up with the flu or a coronavirus, maybe not COVID-19, but a coronavirus, and then they end up, because it takes their immune system out, they end up getting a secondary bacterial infection that takes on a new life of its own, because their immune system's been so busy trying to fight the virus that it's not effectively capable of fighting the bacteria. And that's how the bacterial infection takes on. And it's that secondary issue that can actually create a lot of the emergency problems, right? So, it's not a bad idea if you've got a doctor who's willing to prescribe you an antibiotic to potentially have some in your medicine cabinet. So, again, you may not ever need it. And I'm not a fan. I don't want you guys to get the wrong idea. I'm not a fan of taking and doing these things on a general day-to-day basis, but I am a fan of preparing for an emergency. And this is a very powerful medication that can help in an emergency scenario. So again, get with your doc if you've got a doc that might help you out there, and potentially talk to them about that, and maybe you can get some stocked in your medicine cabinet if you don't already have something in your medicine cabinet. So we've got other medicines. Some of you might be, for example, on thyroid medication. Some of you, for example, might be on anti-inflammatories for an acute bowel distress disorder like Crohn's or ulcerative colitis or something along those lines. And again, although I'm not a fan of using medicines to manage those medicines, I'm more a fan of using diet and lifestyle behavior to help your body heal. Imagine if tomorrow everything was shut down. That's kind of the way I want you to look at this. If tomorrow everything was shut down and you absolutely needed your medicine at this point, what would you do if you didn't have it? What would you do if you only had a week's worth, but everything was shut down for a month or 2 months, right? So especially in acute scenarios. So another example here of an acute scenario would be like an asthma medication. So like, again, a lot of asthmatics, asthma symptoms are actually, in my experience, wheat-based or diet-based. Baker's asthma is a perfect example of that. But again, if you're working your diet and you're not quite there yet, and you rely on that asthma medication or that steroid inhaler periodically to save you from going into a major crisis, these are the kinds of things that I want you to think about in terms of medication. So if you are dependent on a medication right now as it stands, you should prepare to try to have at least a 2-month supply right now, and stay ahead of that as we learn more and more about coronavirus, COVID-19, as the world continues to play this out. You want to stay kind of 2 months ahead of this as best that you can. So again, get ahead of it now so that you're not panicked if you find that the drugstores are closed down, or that for whatever reason, like certain medications aren't coming into the country because we can't get it, because China and India can't produce it, or not allowing or not shipping it out. So again, that's a very real possibility you want to be prepped for. So understand that no drugs effectively treat coronavirus. So we're not talking about drugs treating coronavirus. Now, I've done a show on natural remedies and on things you should be doing right now to prepare your immune system. And we actually put up a new page, a new coronavirus resource page for you on Gluten-Free Society, because what was happening is some of our videos were being censored after the New York Post did a slant piece on natural medicine, accusing me of talking about creating near lethal dose recommendations on vitamins and minerals. So it was so preposterous. Anyway, I won't dwell on that tonight, but we put up a resource page for you. Mel, I sent you that, and we will put that up in the link or in the feed tonight. So any of you coming back, checking back in, just bookmark this page, because as things evolve and as things go on, we're going to be updating this page periodically. We've got about 3 hours of video content there already for you. So it's there. It's, you know, if you can't find it on YouTube and it's being censored on YouTube, you know where you can go and find it. So at any rate, no drug can affect or treat coronavirus. So there's nothing you can really stockpile in that regard. There's no medicines that from the traditional medicine standpoint that actually works. As a matter of fact, things that have been showing much of the most promise is IV vitamin C therapy. And most of you are not going to have access to IV vitamin C therapy. My advice there is just to stock up on vitamin C. Make sure you have plenty for your family, to the tune of everybody being on, every adult person in your household being on anywhere between 5 and 10 grams of vitamin C a day. So again, my advice would be to have enough on hand where you can support the immune system with that vitamin C orally. Powder's a better choice than pills, but if you can't get the powder, you can still get the pills. But again, if you have the option, powder is definitely a better choice. So next, let's go to kind of things that you should prepare for. Aside from medication, what are some of the other things that we can prepare for? Well, let's talk about food. I've seen this happen firsthand. I mentioned that I was in a scenario in a hurricane where the grocery store shelves were completely emptied out. And in some stores in the Houston area currently, things aren't even bad at all, but the grocery stores are running out of certain items like the water, and in some stores the toilet paper is just completely cleaned out, right? So prepare yourself for food. Now, my advice here is buy what you're already going to eat. But buy what you're already going to eat, because you're going to spend the money on it anyway, but try to pick things that have longer shelf life. So kind of as an example here, canned goods, you know, you can get canned goods and they're going to last. They're going to be good. Most canned goods, if they're properly canned, I mean, if you do your own canning, 5 years, you can get 10 years out of a canned good. So they're going to last a really long time. And so we actually have a pantry in our house that's basically rationed. We call it the emergency food stash, because we ration canned goods in the home for several months in case something ever were to happen. So canned goods is one element that you can do. Things like dried fruits, and so dehydrate. If you got a food dehydrator, you can do your own, or you can buy them. But dried meats like beef jerky. There's a company I really like for this. They do several kinds, but it's non-processed. So what you don't want to be is like in this scenario where you are panicked and you didn't prepare, and now you're running to Stop and Go or 7-Eleven and you're picking up like the Slim Jim stuff that's full of like genetically modified soy and horrific, MSG. Like, you don't want to be in a scenario where the world is in a panic around you, and now you're relying on garbage food to keep your wits about you. So again, plan now. But company I like for this is Nick Sticks. They've got turkey, they've got beef, they've got chicken. So whatever your options are, they've got a good varieties of dried meats, and if you stock up on those, that's a smart thing to do as an emergency ration. And if all this passes over and you don't need it, well, you can put one in your lunch every day, or you can eat one every day as a component to your regular diet, and not feel like you just bought a bunch of stuff that you're never going to eat. Other things that you want to consider for longer shelf life, if you tolerate them well too, is nuts and certain seeds. I like pumpkin seed. It's very nutritionally dense and generally very easy to digest and very easily tolerated. But nuts are a great source of calories. They're a great source of fat. So if we're talking about stocking up on them, they go a long way, and they'll take you a long way because they're high caloric. And so again, planning for your food allows you to not be at the mercy of what's left over in the grocery store should something go awry. Some people jokingly suggested last time that the gluten-free food aisle in the grocery store is always still full, even in an emergency. And I would say that food is, most of that's junk anyway. But if you plan ahead, you don't have to worry about, whether or not what's available you're also allergic to. Like, you're not picking the worst thing just so that you don't starve. I was in a situation like that a number of years ago in California when the power in the whole city went out and all the cell service went out. Nobody knew what happened, and we were without power for about 24 hours, without service for 24 hours. So nobody knew whether there was some kind of attack or some kind of power grid failure, because there was no way to get news to anybody, and everybody inside the city was panicking looking for food. That's a bad situation to be in. If you ever want to be in an unpredictable environment that gets very dangerous very quickly, it's when people run out of food and they don't know where they're going to get it, and they will fight for it, and they will fight over it. They will trample people over it. So plan for this. And this way you have plenty, you've stocked up, you don't have to worry about what you're going to eat, and you don't have to worry about potentially eating things that aren't good for you or eating things that you're allergic to. If you're trying to follow the no grain, no pain protocol, you can do this intelligently and still stick with the protocol and maintain your health despite the fact that emergency might be going on around you. Okay, so food, again, canned goods, dried fruits and nuts and meats. Make sure, again, we're looking for high quality. We're looking for organic. We're not cutting the rules just because we're stocking emergency food here. We're still following the same rules of organic, grass-fed, etc. Now, one other tip I can give you in this category is if you have a deep freeze, is to fill it up. Just fill it up with good quality meats. There's a couple of great companies that I recommend if you don't have local stores that carry grass-fed beef. We can pump a resource link into the feed for those of you who don't have like a local Whole Foods or a store that carries, grass-fed, grass-finished types of things. But if you've got a deep freezer, you can fill it full of meats, frozen goods, frozen vegetables, and things of that nature. What that does is, let's just say worst case scenario, the power does go out, which I don't really suspect is going to happen with a virus, although it's more likely to happen in an emergency like fires or emergency like a hurricane or something along that line. But if it does go out, if something happens where you were going to lose power, that freezer, if it's full of frozen things, it will keep cooler longer. So you'll actually have food to eat daily, and it'll sustain you. I mean, that cold meat in that freezer will keep things cold in that freezer for a couple of weeks. So you'll have a couple of weeks of actual good, real food that you can sustain yourself or your family off of. If you've got a deep freeze and it's virtually empty, once the power goes out, that thing's going to cool. It's going to warm up really, really fast. But if it's full of frozen meat, it's going to take a much longer period of time for all of that to thaw out. So if you fill it up, it's going to take you, a good 7 to 10 days, and it won't really, the food in it won't go bad. You'll still be able to eat it. So again, think about stocking that freezer for that type of scenario. So that's kind of the gentle nudge for you to get food prepared, because when your food goes south, your brain goes south, your health goes south. And if we're trying to deal with an entity that can destroy your health, now it puts you at a disadvantage to be able to maintain your health through this. So let's also talk about what you should be focused on doing right now. So a lot of people are just in panic mode, and I don't think anybody really needs to panic, not at this point. It's too soon for that. It's too soon to be scared. But what you want to be focused on, and I talked a little bit more in depth about this, is just eating real food, is just eating good food, taking care of yourself, eating healthy. You want to be focused on getting adequate sleep. You want to be focused on where, we're coming into spring, so hopefully spring just ends this whole viral escapade, and then we can all just laugh about it, a year from now. But you want to get out and get as much fresh air and sunshine as you can. You want to make sure you're moving, you're staying moving, your body's moving. Don't be sedentary in a dark room where you're not getting that movement. Remember, movement circulates your lymphatic fluids, and that's a big part of how your immune system functions and works. Excuse me. So these are things that you should just be focusing on currently is just taking care of yourself, like getting the things done that need to be done by taking care of yourself first. Nothing is the better offense against the coronavirus or any other virus for that matter than just good recipe for taking care of yourself. So make sure you're applying these just kind of basic fundamental things. Okay, what should you be avoiding right now? If we're talking about avoidance of things. So the number one thing you should be avoiding, aside from junk food, alcohol and sugar. These are two things that have known immune damaging properties. They will actually overwhelm your immune system and put you at a disadvantage. So you shouldn't be getting drunk and you shouldn't be eating a ton of sugar. Some people say, well, I'm really stressed and the alcohol helps with the stress. Well, know that while it helps with your stress, it's also going to help suppress your immune system. So you want to be real careful about that at this point in time. Now, additionally, I think many of you following me already know this. This should be a no-brainer, but avoiding gluten, obviously gluten, especially those of you with the gluten sensitivity issue, you don't want to get stuck in a scenario where you didn't plan here. And so now all that's left is foods that contain that. And so now you're in a real pickle. The other thing you want to avoid right now is eating out. Now, if you own a restaurant, I'm sorry. I'm not trying to run you out of business, but the reality is this. We've got a major pandemic of a virus that spreads rather easily, and eating out is one of the quickest ways to get communicable disease. So when you're eating out, 16-year-olds, how well do they wash their hand? Those are the people that are serving your food. 16, 18-year-olds, young kids. Even at major restaurants where maybe they're not young kids, but now you're talking about a mass mingling of germs and the potential for sharing. So again, if you're trying to minimize your exposure to food-induced immunosuppression or immune problems, then eating out right now is not probably in your best interest. So again, if you own a restaurant, I apologize, but I've got to give advice that's right for people for the right reasons. So, okay. Other things that we should be thinking about. So if you're elderly, let's see here, do I have room? If you're an elderly person and you're immunosuppressed, there are some other things that you should be doing now. So when I say this, some cities and rather some countries are already doing this much more aggressively, but here in the US, we haven't really, there's not a whole lot of restriction there's some self-limit, there's some quarantine issues that people are self-quarantining. There's some quarantine issues of cruise ships where people coming in from cruise ships are being quarantined at specific military bases. But that's the extent to the limitation of movement that we have right now in this country, but it could get worse. And so right now, everybody's free to travel. Everybody's free to hop on a bus, a train, a plane, etc. But if you are immunocompromised, you should absolutely not be doing that. So you should be restricting any kind of travel where you're in a place where there's a lot of people, a lot of sharing of germs. So like an airplane, an airport, a bus station, a train station. So think planes, trains, and buses. And if you want to do travel, a car travel would be okay, or probably the safest route if you're driving your own car, right? But the others, planes, trains, and buses, where it's a stronger possibility of communicable spread of disease, you want to really try to look at eliminating that right now if you're immunosuppressed. Again, this is if you're immunocompromised already. And what does that mean? Let's talk about what it means to be immunocompromised. So raise your hand if you're taking a steroid. Because if you're taking steroids right now to control an inflammatory condition, guess what? You are immunocompromised. Raise your hand if you're taking allergy medicines chronically on a daily basis, no matter what season it is. If you're doing that, you're immunocompromised. So again, any of you that are taking biologic medications for autoimmune diseases, things like Enbrel, those types of drugs that suppress the immune system, you're immunosuppressed. So if you're taking medicines that suppress the immune system, then, my advice to you is to stick to what I'm talking about here. Additionally, I know this is going to sound like a broken record, but hygiene is important. Now, although we know that the pasteurization or the kind of the germ theory of disease has been proven, but it's also been disproven, and not really disproven, but it's been shown that we need some germs, right? But it's also been so it's been shown that too much hygiene or being too clean can actually contribute to diseases like autoimmune disease. But as it relates to a viral infectious disease, we want good hygiene practices. We need good hygiene practices. Otherwise, again, you increase that risk for spreading. So this is, the simple stuff: hand washing. I don't think that those Purell gels, those dry gels that people use to wipe their hands out with, we actually studied those in graduate school and compared to see whether or not they suppressed the growth of germs, and they didn't really do all that great a job. So soap is probably your best bet if you're looking at what to use. Just use good soap and really, really scrub down. Soap has, got to understand the outer shell around the bugs, the viruses, the bacteria, etc. It's a fat-based lipid bilayer or lipid layer. And so what soap does is it breaks that down, so it exposes that virus or that bacteria. And that's what helps to kill it and disinfect it. So using soap adequately, some people just kind of give it a little tiny dab and then mostly water. No, use that soap very liberally right now, and make sure that you're scrubbing your hands down, especially if you're out touching public doorknobs in public places, or shaking people's hands like and I would advise not even to do that, really not shake people's hands right now. But a lot of hygiene goes a long way for protecting yourself. Again, especially those of you, we're talking about people here in number 5 who are immunocompromised. Okay. So what else can we do? Avoid large crowds. Don't go to the movie theater. Don't go shopping through the mall if you're immunosuppressed. Like, just really get fresh air, walk outside, but don't walk in walk in open spaces, parks, things of that nature. Again, weather permitting is the best thing that you can do. But stay out of closed spaces with lots of people. Another thing that you can do, and this is going to be unique to who your doctor is, but ask about nebulized glutathione. Now, some people take glutathione orally. Oral glutathione doesn't work that well. It doesn't absorb, and that's its problem. Even some of the sustained release formulas don't really absorb very well. So you can take NAC. I did a whole show on the super viral fighting power of NAC, and this is a good idea, especially if your doctor won't entertain the idea around nebulized glutathione. Let me put that word in here, nebulized. What this is that some people do nebulized steroid inhalers, so they get steroid treatments into their lung with severe asthma, and it just kind of calms down the inflammation in the lung. But you can actually nebulize glutathione. Now, this is not me medically telling or suggesting that any of you to go do this without supervision. Be very, very clear about that. This is one of those things, you got to get a prescription for it, and so ask your doctor about it. A nebulizer is simple. You can find one of those. You can buy those on Amazon, but you can't don't just go buy glutathione over the counter and put glutathione in a nebulizer and then start trying to nebulize yourself. Like, you really want to get the right kind. And so this is where getting the right type of prescription can be very, very helpful. So if you're immunosuppressed, again, you might have a conversation with your doctor about nebulized glutathione as a backup plan for home use should you start coming down with something. It can be a very effective way to get the strongest antioxidant your body produces into your lungs to protect you from things like the pneumonia aspect of coronavirus, because that's what most people who are passing, they're dying from the pneumonia. The secondary side effect or the secondary consequences of late stages, they're already immunocompromised. Many of them are, not all of them, but many of them are. And it hits their lungs, and it basically creates a problem in the lungs. So glutathione is very protective of the lung. And so again, have that conversation with your doc, because it might be something that you can consider doing or having at home for home use. Okay, so those are for those of you who are immunosuppressed. Now, the last thing here, let's talk about, and I've done a deeper show on this, so I'm just going to kind of give you the overview on this one in number 6, but it's nutritional support, right? Take care of your body. Get the right nutritional support supplementation right now. And so my favorites, we've talked about, I did a full show on these. This is what This is what New York Times, or not New York Times, but New York Post and Business Insider lied about and censored me about. But vitamin C is a must. Vitamin D, vitamin A, zinc. These are like super important vitamins, minerals, and then we have things like NAC, N-acetylcysteine. There are other things certainly that you could add to this list, but if we're looking at what I would recommend the most in terms of like individual supplements that you can take, this is where it's at. Now, other things that you might want to consider in this regard for nutrition is making sure you're getting adequate protein. A lot of people, especially the elderly and especially the immunocompromised, are eating a low-protein diet because they've been told that a low-protein diet may be the right move for them. And what happens is their protein levels drop. Remember, all of your antibodies are made from protein. So if you're not getting adequate protein on a day-to-day basis, then your body's ability to perform antibodies is going to be somewhat compromised as a result of not getting that protein in you. Now, something else that you might want to consider supplementally right now is a good probiotic. The probiotics are not going to fight the virus per se, okay? But as I mentioned earlier, one of the side effects or the secondary issues is bacterial infection. So probiotic will give you kind of a support in terms of that risk for developing that bacterial infection. And then one of the other things that I'll mention, just as a general rule, is strong antioxidants. So really strong antioxidant supplement. I'll put that up here. Or just foods that are really rich in antioxidants. And so what foods are really rich in antioxidants? Things like, for example, berries, blueberries, raspberries, strawberries. The good news is we're coming into summer, spring, and so these are becoming more available locally. They're starting to come in. I know my bushes are all starting to flower, and many of them are starting to form berries already. So, you want these things naturally as much as you can get them through food, but it's not a bad idea to have that in your arsenal of supplementation either, because when the viruses take hold, one of the things that happens is they can wreck your antioxidant system because they create so much oxidation in the body. And so those antioxidants can help kind of work like a mop or a sponge to soak up that free radical damage and keep your body as healthy and as vibrant and as strong as it can be. So these are kind of my go-tos. And again, I did a show I actually did a couple hours on all this. So if you have that link to our resource page, the coronavirus resource page that we've created for you, you can go back and watch those videos if you have not yet seen them. And I go into really great depth about, how much to take, how long you should take it, age groups, which age groups take and how much to take. So those are the strategies. That's my prepper's guide for coronavirus. So hopefully all of you are working all of these 6 angles to a great degree right now and getting prepared for the worst. And hopefully, like I said, hopefully all this just blows over and we laugh about it in a year or two from now and we say, oh yeah, that was just another viral scare that really didn't impact us. But again, like I said at the start of the show tonight, failing to plan is planning to fail. So don't let the panic come to your house. Just get ready for it now. So now I'm going to open the floor for any questions that any of you have. Yeah, I know, Juan. They didn't pull Dr. Oz's video, and I'm not Dr. Oz. I'm Dr. Osborne, and maybe that was it. He's got a lot of pulling power with pharmacy, and you look at who advertises on his commercials. It doesn't make sense that a guy talking about health would have pharmacy advertisers. But anyway, that's beyond the point. So let's see what else we got here. What should celiacs do with this viral situation? Celiacs should do all these things. Remember, just by being a gluten-sensitive individual, if you're celiac, by definition, depending on how long you've been gluten-free, you probably are immunocompromised, because one of the side effects of gluten sensitivity and celiac disease is malabsorption, maldigestion of nutrients. So you become very malnourished. Being malnourished is one of the main things that causes the immune system to not function well. I mean, in all the research studies that have been done over the last 50 years, we know that one of the most important elements to your immune system is good nutrition. So if you're gluten sensitive, if you're just getting started, if you're new to this, consider yourself part of the immunocompromised crowd and do all of these things. But focus on, should you be traveling right now, that kind of thing. Probably not a good idea. Avoiding public spaces, super hygiene right now, and to avoid any potential for catastrophe. Yeah, I saw that. Laura says the State Department's urging all Americans to stay off cruise ships. That's a great idea. Cruise ships are like a floating germ box. I heard somebody once call them floating toilets. That's just my opinion of them. I've been on a cruise, but I won't go back. They're just not a good idea right now, especially. Let's see here. Kasia says, plenty of toilet paper in Nebraska. Or I don't know, in NE, Indiana. I don't know what NE stands for. Today's prep picked out washer dryer to be installed Sunday. No more having to go to laundromat. Perfect. So yeah, I like that. Let's see here. Yeah, so some people are buying up the masks. I don't know how truly effective those masks are going to be. If the virus is as infectious as it's being claimed, it can penetrate through the mucus. But if it stops the spray, then maybe it can reduce it to a certain degree. But I don't know that I'd spend. I saw on it was one of these websites that were trying to sell masks for like $30. These little 8-cent masks. People are gouging and driving up the price on them. Oh, let's see. Is vitamin C okay if you have an autoimmune disorder? Greggs wants to know. Absolutely. Vitamin C is perfectly safe even with autoimmunity. Some people, you hear about the myth that if you take an immune supporting supplement that it makes your autoimmune disease worse. In the case of vitamin C, that's absolutely not true. It's perfectly safe and perfectly fine. Let's see. If you come out of this with extra food you did not eat and don't want to, give it to charity. Oh, so that's just a commentary there. Yeah. Yeah, so somebody's chiming in on fermenting foods. Yeah, they don't really require any refrigeration. So, if you've got a clay crock pot at home, you want to ferment some cabbage, make some sauerkraut, easy enough to do, and you can can it once you've got it fermented. Do we need to make sure we balance out our zinc supplementation with copper? I've heard that it needs to be a ratio of 15 milligrams of zinc to 1 milligram of copper. Actually, the ratio is more like 7.5 to 1. The 15 to 1 ratio is old research. New research shows the better ratio is 7.5 to 1. In this scenario, not so much. I mean, you can balance it out with copper. But if you're on a good quality multivitamin that has copper in it, you don't need to worry about it. We're trying to push extra zinc right now because of the different functions that zinc has revolving around immune function. So we're not talking about taking high doses of zinc or large doses of zinc indefinitely. We're talking about in preparation for what's coming. So if you're doing it for a few months, it shouldn't be an issue where you have to worry about supplementing with extra copper, especially if you're on a good multivitamin. Crystal wants to know, where can we find resources to get hygiene products that are not harmful, shampoo, soaps, etc.? That's a great question. We have, if you go to glutenfreesociety.org, there's a lifestyles under the shop. You hit lifestyles as a category, and there's a company there that sells some of the soaps and shampoos and facial creams and things of that nature. That facial cream, not so much a hygiene piece, but the soaps and the shampoos are a hygiene part of that. Take your medicine asks, like, is 1 glass of wine okay? It's a judgment call. Look, I don't recommend it right now, because here's where this question goes. Is 1 glass of wine okay? Okay, so you had 1 glass of wine last month. That's not a big deal probably, right? But if your question is 1 glass of wine every night okay? This is where we get into trouble, right? It's a person's definition of moderate quantities. A glass of wine a night, when you hear the cardiologist talk about, oh yeah, a glass of wine a night is heart healthy because of the polyphenols in the red wines. And the reality is, no, the poison and the glyphosate and the sugar in the wine and the alcohol all outweigh any antioxidant benefit that wine ever had. And most of those antioxidant wine studies are funded by wine industry and special interest groups. So, to answer your question, hopefully that clarifies or answers your question a little bit more accurately. Let's see here. Yeah, so if some of you are asking about essential oils, a great resource for essential oils is my good friend Dr. Eric Z, Dr. Eric Zielinski, or oftentimes referred to as Dr. Z. He's got a lot of great information on using essential oils in the home, and certainly there are certain essential oils that can help with immune function. Some of my favorite are your citrus blends. I really like tangerine is a great oil, essential oil for immune boosting, but and you can certainly diffuse essential oils in your home as a hygiene measure, or as a measure to help kind of prevent the spread. But I wouldn't rely on it in and of itself by itself. Let's see here. Do N95 masks work? Barb wants to know. Yes, they do. I mean, they're better than nothing. Certainly, they're better than nothing. And if you're trying to protect yourself, I'd say if you're going to go out in major public spaces, it's not a bad idea. If you're doing some traveling, to try to protect yourself to a certain degree, it's better than no protection. And then the next part of that question is, do antibacterial wipes even work with viruses? Depends on what's in them. The wipes themselves, a lot of them do have a solution that is antiviral and antibacterial. So yes, they can work. What I was talking about not working all that well were that, like, the hand sanitizers, the ones that it's like the gel, and then there's no water involved. You just rub the gel in on your hands. They don't work too very well. We actually did a study on those where we cultured people after washing their hands with those, and we found lots of growth of bacteria and viruses. So not super effective, those, but the wipes, another matter. They actually have been shown to work. So yeah, wipe your cart down in the grocery store, or wear your own gloves. I've seen that, some people actually putting on some of their own gloves. I know that sounds kind of crazy right now, and you might feel like, gosh, this is really overboard. But again, I'm not talking about anything other than just trying to protect yourself with good hygiene and good practices. So part of it is your comfort level. If you're going to feel better wearing those gloves, and it's going to stress you out knowing that you're protecting yourself, then by all means wear them, and don't care what other people think. Other people think weirdly of your diet. If you're following a gluten-free diet, they think weirdly of that. If you're exercising instead of not, they think weirdly of that. I mean, look at the name connotation that we've been given as a core group of people. Our tribe generally referred to as health nuts, orthorexic health nuts, because we care about how we feel and about how our bodies are being taken care of. So don't so much worry about what other people think either. Yeah, less processed food's a good idea. Yeah, I like hearing that. Andromeda says, thanks to keto gluten-free, I'm off prescription meds, which is one less thing to worry about. So true. This is not a great time to go vegan and stop eating animals, Linda. I don't know why that comment's even in there. That's a ridiculous claim to claim that everybody needs to go vegan. Now, I don't have a problem if somebody is vegan, but to say that this is a great time to go vegan as if it's going to somehow support your immune system. No, vegan diets are traditionally low in vitamin A. They're low in zinc. They're low in protein. This is a terrible time to consider going on a vegan diet, especially if you haven't been properly tested to assess whether or not being vegan is actually a good move for you or not. It's a terrible comment. What about vinegar and peroxide for cleaning? Yes, vinegar and peroxide both work good for cleaning. Nancy says, so you're saying allergy meds suppress the immune system? If so, what should one do? Yes, they do suppress the immune system, Nancy. There are natural alternatives to allergy medicine. Now, if you have life-threatening allergy where you get an anaphylactic shock over cedar, or you have really severe cedar fever or ragweed allergens or something like that, you have to weigh the pros and the cons. I mean, we are going into spring, but my experience with most people that have allergies is they really don't have as many allergies as they think they do. They have a lot of food problems and a lot of behavior problems that make their immune system so weak that they can't handle environmental allergens. So then they, on top of that, they take medicine that further suppresses their symptoms. But if you're eating well and doing well and you have some outdoor allergens that you're struggling with, one of the support products that I recommend is called HistAssist. And what it is it's a natural immune support. It has ingredients. Some of the ingredients are actually on this list. It has NAC in it. It has vitamin C in it. Has vitamin A in it. It has zinc in it. It has something called quercetin in it. And what those nutrients combined serve to do is they help to stabilize the membranes around mast cells, preventing aggressive release of histamine. So it doesn't suppress the immune system. It just strengthens and shores up and supports the cell membrane around your immune cells so they're not just breaking open at every exposure. Okay. So Neely wants to know, is the vitamin C used in an IV typically sourced from corn? Thanks for the advice. Depends. So you can actually, there are doctors that specifically make sure that it is not sourced from corn. And that's, if you're looking into IV vitamin C, that would be a question I would ask if you're avoiding grain. Is liposomal glutathione more absorbable if ingested? It's more absorbable, yes, than non-liposomal. But here are the problem with every liposomal formula I've ever looked at, and I've looked at pretty much all of them on the market, is most of them either contain corn ethanol, which is alcohol, which I don't recommend because it's not good for you, or they contain corn filler. I don't know why this is such a problem in the supplement industry that so many, even good supplement companies, pick a lot of their products using that type of thing. But a lot of your liposomals, that's the problem with them. I mean, even, some people do liposomal vitamin C, but the problem with liposomal Cs is that a number of the ingredients in them are corn derivative. So I just don't recommend them, not if you have a different option. Cindy says, I've never seen you recommend colloidal silver. What are your thoughts on colloidal silver and fighting viruses and bacteria? Actually, Cindy, I have a product called Ultra Silver. So I like silver in terms of supporting immune function, but here's why. Let me clarify. Silver can be used as a medicinal for sure, no doubt about it, but it's not an essential mineral. What you'll find with all of these other recommendations is that these things are essential, meaning the body can't survive without zinc. It can't survive without vitamin A. It can't survive without vitamin C. These things are essential. Your body can survive without silver. Now, can silver be ineffective? Yeah, I mean, there are some people that they get silver and they line their towels or their washcloths with silver as an extra measure for an antibacterial or antiviral spread. Some people use the silver gels or the silver sprays or the silver liquids, the silver nose sprays. So silver is used for a lot of people. It's used in the homeopathic world as an antiviral, antibacterial, and it can be very effective. So hopefully that helps clarify why I don't generally tend to recommend it as again, I could recommend a lot of things, and like I could send you all out to the health food store and you could all buy $1,000 worth of supplements. But what I'm trying to do in this is really try to help keep you concentrated on what I think is going to be the most important thing for you to have on hand. Should there be problems that come, things that you absolutely need to support you in the best way. But no, silver's good. Silver's good. Can an asthma sufferer take N-acetylcysteine in any form? Define what you mean by in any form. If we're talking about N-acetylcysteine or N-acetyl-L-cysteine, yes. I mean, that would be in the form of oral supplementation. Some people will do like, I've seen some people do some crazy things. We won't go there. But yes, if you're talking about oral supplementation, any form pretty much, the only form really on the market that should be being on the market is NAC, is N-acetylcysteine, sometimes also referred to as N-acetyl-L-cysteine, but they're the same thing. Let's see here. Best protein for shakes or ways to get the most protein. Best way to get protein if you're not a vegan or vegetarian is to eat meat. But secondary to that is ultra pure protein. as a protein shake, and we can throw a link up for you on that one. Ultra Proof Protein is a grass-fed, grass-finished beef bone broth protein that's very strong and very effective for getting your protein in. And you can mix that with, we've got a number of different recipes. If you've got a copy of No Grain, No Pain, one of my favorite smoothie recipes is actually in that book, along with 30 other recipes for good, clean eating. Good cough syrup for a gluten-free child. Yeah, cough syrups, one of the problems with most cough syrups is they're full of sugar, and that's where you get into a problem. I would more recommend for, if you're trying to soothe the throat, one is keep a water bottle handy. A lot of people underestimate the power of water and hydration. But two, like herbal tea remedies. There are a number of herbal tea remedies that have different herbals in them, like elm or aloe, that can actually soothe the throat and soothe coughing. And you can put a little Manuka honey in that, and that also does a really good job. It supports the immune system as well. So for kids, cough drops. If you can find, I want to say Ricola has a brand that's sweetened with stevia, and that's a pretty good product. But as far as syrups are concerned, again, the problem with putting anything in syrup form is that they all are going to have sugar in it. It's on my list of don't do that. So don't really recommend those. Now, I've seen a few on the market that are sweetened with honey, and you'll just have to look for those. I can't give you a brand off the top of my head. How much vitamin D should you give kids on a daily basis? With vitamin D, it depends. What I like to do is, first and foremost, is if you don't have no idea where your children's vitamin D levels are, one very safe thing to do, provided they don't have kidney disease like scleroderma or a calcium metabolism disease, is to give kids for 3 days, give them 1,000 units of vitamin D per pound of body weight. So if your child is 50 pounds, you'd give them 50,000 units of vitamin D for 3 days in a row, and then stop. That should give them a nice boost in their vitamin D level. Beyond that, it just depends, because specific advice is more done where you actually test their levels and then see where their levels are at. And then, generally with kids, again, depending on their weight, therapeutic dosing can start anywhere in the neighborhood of 4,000 to 10,000 units a day for several months. So it just depends on what their current level is as to how much you should give them. So Stephanie wants to know my opinion on the Umka Cold Care product line. I think a lot of people swear by them. I personally don't use them in my practice, but I'm not opposed to them. I do use some homeopathic remedies in my practice. That's just not one that we typically use, but I'm not opposed to it at all. I just I can't speak intelligently enough from an experience perspective about how great they work. Maybe others of you that are out there in our tribe might want to chime in for Stephanie's question. If you've had good experience with Umka Cold Care products, Pelargonium specifically, then just let her know what your experience has been. The best way to eat protein outside of meat, I think I answered that already. We talked about protein powder. Beyond that, the only other source of protein is nuts and vegetables, and then you just have to mix and match. What about using oregano essential oil on the bottom of your feet? How much and how often? For what, Don? Clarify that question for me, because oregano oil on the bottom of your feet is not going to do a whole lot on this. It's not going to do a whole lot to prevent a coronavirus spread. Okay, let's see here. Thoughts on rice bran? Tana, I can tell you probably haven't read No Grain, No Pain, because you know the answer to this question. So those of you, again, not picking on you, Tana, but rice bran is not okay. If you haven't read No Grain, No Pain, I highly recommend that you get a copy and read it. Rice is oftentimes used as a gluten-free substitute. There are several problems with that as an issue, and rice bran falls under that umbrella. Stacy read that keto diet is not good to be on right now. It said that what she read said that high fat, low carb diets cause low immunity. That's just not true. That being said, look, what do I recommend? You know, a lot of you follow different diet plans, but what do we really want in terms of balance in the diet? We want equality in our macronutrients. So carbs, fats, and proteins. I call it the rule of thirds. You know, generally speaking, you want to have an equal distribution of carbs, fats, and proteins. You know, in every walk of life in history, what do we see in nature? We always see that balance is what plays out. And so, you know, high carb diets made people diabetic and sick. High fat diets, there are problems with high fat diets depending on who you are. So, you know, some people go keto and lose a bunch of weight and then start to gravitate back toward this. But I recommend the rule of thirds. So if you're really trying to like tailor your diet to be more optimal in regards to balance, that's what I would recommend that you look toward. Is there a zinc? Diandra wants to know, is there a zinc that you can take without making you feel sick or nauseous? The big issue with zinc, it can do that. Zinc can be upsetting to the stomach. So you just have to make sure when you take your zinc, if you have like a tender stomach, eat a meal first, take the zinc like before your last 2 bites of the meal. So eat the bulk of your meal, 70-80% of your food, then take the zinc, then take the last 2 bites. And that's going to go a long way to making that zinc not make you feel nauseous. Try that first, because there really aren't any forms of zinc, if you get the dose adequately, that are not going to create nausea, unless you're trying to take it on an empty stomach, of course. The other route you might take, Deandra, is a zinc lozenge. We have a zinc lozenge as well, if you want to check that out. It's a gluten-free version. You got to be careful with a lot of the lozenges because, again, they're sweetened with sugar, or what they're using in them are artificial corn flavoring agents or natural corn flavoring agents to make them taste good. So Lisa wants to know, is there a difference between alpha lipoic acid and R-lipoic acid? Our form, alpha lipoic acid, is a better supplement all the way around. It's a better form of lipoic acid. Let's see. June says, we're going on a Viking river cruise and got an email that we can cancel without penalty. Yeah, probably a good idea. I'm familiar with Viking. They are smaller than these cruise boats with 3,000 people, but still pretty confined. I think I answered that. Somebody asked about keto. Is olive leaf good? Yeah, olive leaf is fine. It's a natural antibiotic and a natural antifungal. And you don't want to be taking natural antibiotics and natural antifungals for prevention, because you've got to remember, I've seen a lot of people do this. They're just going to take oregano, or they're just going to take olive leaf, or they're just going to take fill in the blank, right? The problem with doing that, if you do it indefinitely, you're actually knocking out your good bacteria and creating problems in your good bacteria. Remember, just because it's natural doesn't mean that it can't also be effective at knocking out your normal microflora. So you don't necessarily want to do those things indefinitely just to do them as a prevention method. This is, again, why does my list go back to this? Why does it go back? It goes back to essential nutrients versus plant-based medicines, right, or non-essential nutrients. It's because your body can't survive without these things, and these things are notorious for helping your body combat if something like corona happens. So you don't want to just be on oregano indefinitely, or garlic indefinitely, or any of these antimicrobials indefinitely. So Wanda says, what was the plastic bottle you just drank out of? She thought she was trying to catch me in something. It's not plastic, it's metal. It's stainless steel, made in Switzerland, not in China, because the Chinese products, you can't trust them. They tend to want to put lead in a lot of their stuff, and so I'm not trusting them. Let's see here. Okay to take Virid as a preventative. Yeah, because Virid there's nothing in there that kills or wipes out your microbiome. So you can take it as a preventative. It wouldn't be like taking high doses of oregano or high doses of olive leaf or something like that. Let's see here. What brand of essential oils do I recommend? An organic version. So whatever you're buying, just make sure you're buying organically. Again, I mentioned Dr. Eric Z, Dr. Zelinsky, or Dr. Z earlier. He'd be a better person to ask that question to, because he's probably got several brands that he could recommend for different reasons. Just like I have different supplement, different brands that I can recommend for different reasons. But the key with any essential oil is that you're buying a pure form that is organic, that's not contaminated with pesticides and other junk. Angela wants to know, would sauna use be good? Would sauna use be good? Not if you're trying to fight a coronavirus. I mean, not particularly. I mean, a sauna is just generally good if you're doing a deep sweat, or if you have the need to detox, you can use a sauna to detox. But it's not something you necessarily need to go and buy per se to protect yourself from coronavirus. But saunas are great. Infrared saunas are great. What do I think about mammalian meat versus others? You mean like snake meat or chicken meat? I think they're all good. I think the meat in and of itself depends on the source of the animal more than the animal type. So like, is bison healthier than for example, sheep or goat? It depends on how the animal is taken care of. It depends on the stress level of the animal. It depends on what the animal was fed. Like these are all things that matter. You are what you eat eats, but you also are what you eat experiences in the life that they had. So you want to buy humanely raised products for sure as a higher level of an option. Let's see here. Yeah, so Judy says breathing in essential oil is not good for lungs. I don't know that I agree with that. I think it depends on what product essential oil you're buying. If it's got contamination products that you're breathing in directly into your lung, yeah, that might not be the best thing for your lung. So Ian wants to know about Quicksilver's liposomal glutathione. It actually does. If you look at the liposomal glutathione, it doesn't say corn on the label, but it contains corn ethanol. And this is what I mean. Like a lot of you buy products, they don't say corn, but they contain something that is corn, but it just doesn't say it. And that's what you have to be real careful of. Ozone machine to sanitize your car. Yeah, you can. Ozone's very effective, antiviral, antibacterial. Which type of zinc is best to take? Any zinc that's chelated well. I mean, I have a product called Ultra Zinc, Dave, that I recommend. It's a zinc chelate, the Krebs cycle chelate. It's a very good product, and it comes with some of the cofactors that help activate zinc and to help it work better. Let's see. No question there. So Mary, I like this. Mary commented because there was a question earlier about. I asked if any of you had, had a product that you'd used, and one of them was New Chapter's elderberry syrup. They have a corn and sugar-free variety cough syrup, so that might be that might be helpful for some of you looking. Yeah, royal jelly and propolis for sore throats can be effective. S-acetylglutathione bioavailability, it's not great. I mean, it's better than regular glutathione, but again, if you're trying to get glutathione levels up, in my opinion, the best way to do that is NAC, N-acetylcysteine, and just do it in higher doses, starting out at around 1,200 milligrams a day if you're really trying to get your levels up there. I did a whole show on N-acetylcysteine. You can go back on our Corona resource page and watch that show, but I go into detail on why. Let's see here. Let's see. Where can we find Donna wants to know, let's scroll down, just where can we find, lost it. The questions just don't stop. Where can we find links to the food supply places that I talked about? Well, they should be in the feed. So if you look at the links that my team posted in the feed, just go back and look through the feed, and those links are there. So the links we talked about tonight, I think, were mostly like grass-fed. We talked about dried fruits and meats, canned goods, nuts. Then I had several resources for those. Also have a resource for bone broth. So that's another thing that has good shelf life that you can stock up on. It's a really good nutrient-dense food if you tolerate bone broth well. Okay. All right. So I think we're maybe just about out of time here. I just see the questions keep coming, and we could probably go all night answering questions, but I got to get home and take care of myself and my family as well. I want to just say thank you for spending your Monday evening with me as always. We'll get this video posted to our coronavirus resource page. Again, we're just housing everything there. I've invested in some new technology that allows zero censorship coming in. So if you find that you type in Dr. Osborne coronavirus on YouTube or Facebook and nothing comes up, we'll post that link in the feed again for you on the page that we just bookmarked this page. And all things coronavirus, as this whole thing evolves, we're going to keep putting in updates and keep talking about pertinent, important things as it comes along. So just keep that page bookmarked, and you'll always be able to come back to it as a resource page without censorship. So wish you all an excellent week, and we'll see you same time next week, 6 p.m. Central Standard Time, for another episode of Pick Dr. Osborne's Brain. Take care. Hey, don't forget to tune in next week, same time, 6 p.m. Central Standard Time, for another Pick Dr. Osborne's Brain show. Bring all your toughest health questions to me. I look forward to answering them. And before you leave today, make sure you hit subscribe. And once you do, click that bell. That bell is going to allow us to remind you right before we go live. But it's also going to allow us to remind you when we come out with other video content all week long. We've got lots of episodes coming your way all week long, and I don't want you to miss anything. So again, subscribe, hit that bell so that you can get notified when we have that new information put up for you. Thanks so much, and I'm wishing you excellent health. Have a great week. We'll see you next Monday night.